Hello, my name is Ken Kinter. I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers University. And the purpose of this presentation is something called Helping Without Enabling. It was geared toward family members of the Intensive Family Support Services, or IFSS. This is actually a summary of a couple presentations that I've done for them in the past and hope to do again in the future. As always, my contact information is on the bottom of this first slide. Feel free to give me a holler if you have any questions or any other information about this. So before we get rolling, I want to give a shout out, credit where credit is due. I work for the Rutgers State Hospital Psychiatric Rehabilitation Initiative, whose mission it is to improve care and working conditions at the New Jersey State Psychiatric Hospitals. The New Jersey Department of Health has been very supportive, financially and otherwise, in help making that mission a reality for many, many years now, and hopefully many years to come. So credit where credit is due there. Thank you very much for your help. It makes this video and pretty much all of our work possible. So this video is a little different from the other ones that you may have seen in this channel, and I welcome you to look at my YouTube channel or our department website about this. This one is geared toward family members, people who have an adult child who has a mental illness or an addiction and is struggling with that situation. So we're going to be talking about the barriers to independence, the challenges that someone with mental illness or an addiction faces in becoming independent, and strategies for families in having those barriers, particularly when that adult child is living in the house. And this is geared specifically for situations where the adult child doesn't seem to be progressing anywhere. They might not be involved in care. They're not getting going toward independence, which might be school or might be work or might be their own place, and everything sort of stands still. The idea from this presentation came from when I worked in Ocean County. Ocean County has a great a high number of retired persons who have adult children in their 30s or their 40s living with them, and there's no end to that situation. What ends up happening is one of the parents ends up getting sick or passing away, and then that surviving parent is now overwhelmed with the care of the adult child and also their loved one, or grieving their loved one. Now we have a multidimensional issue, which may result in the adult child being hospitalized, but then not being able to return to the home. It's a mess. So the purpose of this presentation was to help people develop a plan to deal with the situation before it gets to that point. So some details about me and my own work history. I've been in the mental health system for about 30 years, working in a variety of settings, mostly emergency settings, some outpatient settings, and then more lately as a trainer, consultant, and professor. However, I still do private practice as well. So here's basically our pictorial of this presentation. So we've got the person, the family, and the mental health system, and all of them sort of confine the person in sort of a cage. So let's break out each of those different domains and what the challenges are to independence for them. For the person themselves suffering from the illness, you've got the symptoms, the illness themselves. I can also throw along with that the holdup in social development that happens. When someone has a mental illness or an addiction, their social development stops. This is also true for medical problems as well. If someone's diagnosed with cancer very young, I had the experience of having a high school classmate diagnosed with cancer while in high school, and all of his social growth and development stopped because his main purpose in life, and rightly so, was combating the illness. So this isn't just about mental illness or addictions. Any major illness stops all that stuff. It just totally takes priority. I call it a desk clear. It's like that strong breeze that blows all the papers off your desk. I've got my whole little life organized here, and then this big strong wind comes in and blows it all off. So other aspects, if there's violence involved, which can, we're going to be talking about gaslighting in detail, but other forms of manipulation or resistance, that person resisting efforts to independence. Part of what we talk about is the person being in the pre-contemplation stage. Person, despite maybe having a well-documented illness or addiction, may feel, I don't have a problem. That's what pre-contemplation is in summary. And we have a video as well, several of them about stages of change and motivational interviewing that provide more background about that. Pre-contemplation is encapsulated by, I don't have a problem, you have a problem. And if any of you are in this position where you have a loved one who is not working, not going to school, not functioning independently, but can live in your house and say, I don't have a problem, you have a problem, here's where we are. Non-compliance with treatment, specifically medication treatment, but also any treatment at all, including vocational and all the stuff that would help move them forward in life. Isolating, and a very wise person once said to me that isolation is relapse's waiting room. And that is way too true. As we mentioned, the social and developmental delays, and then also the reduced lifespan. People with severe and persistent mental illness tend to live into their 50s. That's about 25 years shorter than the average lifespan. And not only is that lifespan shorter, but the person becomes sort of geriatric and less able earlier. It's not just that they die abruptly in their 50s. The whole lifespan is compressed down 20 or 25 years. So here's what we were talking about with the stages of change. Again, we have a couple other videos. You can look at my YouTube channel or Rutgers SHPRI website. You'll find this. So you have these different stages where you have pre-contemplation, which I don't have a problem. Contemplation is, I have a problem, but I don't know what to do about it. Preparation is, I'm putting together a plan. Now, corollary about preparation, there really has to be a plan, not I'm going to tomorrow. That's not a plan, that's a wish. Action is when that actually gets put into play, and then maintenance is when it's been going on for a while and it gets easier. Some more details about pre-contemplation. They can't see the solution. They can't see the problem. I can't convince you to take medication for a medical problem that you don't have. They feel that they don't have the problem. So there's the argument. They have no plan on changing the problem. They want to change the people around them. This is commonly what we call denial. Usually there's a part of the person that knows there's a problem, but there are many more reasons to not acknowledge that. And after all, who wants to be diagnosed with a mental illness? Who wants to be diagnosed with an addiction? Nobody wants this. It's heavily stigmatized, and it impedes, admitting it admits to this thing that's going to be impeding your process, your progress forward in life. So especially with people that are in pre-contemplation, there's a lot of resistance. And this resistance can be active or it can be passive. Some of the more active ones are blaming you, disagreeing with you, arguing, all this kind of stuff. Ignoring, and I throw this piece in, including saying whatever you want to hear. So I'm going to tell you I'm going to go to rehab tomorrow. I'm going to go look for a job tomorrow. I'm going to fill out an application, but it's a loop that we just keep going through and it never actually proceeds anywhere. Some of the more passive ways are through manipulation. So these can take a variety of forms, from silence to the threat of violence or actual violence. So for the caregiver side, there's this whole thing about congruence and dissonance. Are you supporting healthy behaviors? Are you financing an addiction? Are you paying a person to live? Are they being rewarded basically for bad behavior? Does what you do and what you say add up? Are you doing what you feel is right? One of the hallmarks of knowing when you've stepped off the path is something called resentment. If you are doing something good and you resent it, there's a couple things going on here. First of all, the good thing that you're giving has now become a poison. But the other part of it is you're doing it against your better judgment. Resentment is a sign that something is wrong. It's that little voice in your head telling you this isn't working. So fundamental thing here, people change when the fear of the new is overcome by the discomfort of the old. I do another video on crisis. It's where what we've been doing will no longer work. And if you see the videos on motivational interviewing, you'll see that dissonance increases in the beginning part of change and then decreases. So at first, there's this period of crisis and trauma that comes first, and then it ends up stepping down as things move forward. But I really want to call attention to that resentment thing. If you feel resentment for helping a loved one, part of it is because you know you're not really helping them. You're sort of buying peace or buying time. But as we mentioned before, this is not a sustainable arrangement. It will change. So gaslighting has become a huge topic in recent years. And it's just when someone takes pieces of your story and spins it back on you to make you question your own sanity. The person twists your words or just looks at something selective that they did. It's just manipulating the truth any which way to make you question yourself. The mentally ill or addicted adult child needs chaos around them. In fact, the family situations I've seen that have been the most difficult are the ones where the parents are what we call split. So we have parent A who says, I need this person out of the house. I can't have them living here anymore. This isn't working. And then you have the other parent B, who says, we can't just throw them out. We can't just abandon them. We have to take care of them. We have to keep trying to get them into help. and the person gets in between those two, has split those two people, and while they are in disagreement, this situation will be frozen and will last indefinitely. So very often what happens is, what is a plan where we can get both parents or both caregivers? I'm using the term parents. It's usually the parents, but not always. How do we get them on the same page? What can they be on the same page about? What can they be a united front about? Because that will actually make something happen. I have a couple references on the last slide. If you've ever seen Wrong Number, the skit by Carol Burnett, I can't include that in here because YouTube videos, it's copyrighted, it's not mine. Look up Wrong Number by Carol Burnett, 7 minutes long. It will tell you pretty much everything you need to know about gaslighting. There's also a famous old movie about gaslighting, which is why I confess I have not seen it. I've just heard all about it, but I would definitely check that out too. So family-focused threats to independence. As we mentioned before, it's unsustainable. The parents are going to get old. Parents are going to get sick. This will not last. Now, part of why this situation hangs around very long is because there has been, this is a grieving period. Having a mentally ill, addicted, or sick child is the most traumatic stressor that I can think of. And as tragic as it is, if that child dies, death is final. This has been referred to as the grief that never ends. The person is sick, they're not well, they're not able to achieve the goals that the average person gets to achieve, or the goals that they wanted to achieve. They have all these additional barriers to deal with. They can achieve them, but they just have to go through all these other barriers first. So that grief and that shame, and we'll talk about where the shame gets brought to the family on top of that, never ends. There's also something it's not listed on here, but something called network shrinkage, which is just where families get together and they talk about their kids, how they're doing in school and soccer practice and the football team, and are they going to college, and people bond around the progress of their children. Well, you have a mentally ill or addicted child, that doesn't happen anymore. So the family pulls back from that. So they pull back from their normal supports because of the shame of, so-and-so's in rehab again, so-and-so's in the hospital, or he's 34 years old and he's still living at home, that sort of thing. Part of the challenge is that there is no exit strategy. There's no plan for this to end. We're just going like this, and we're just waiting for that external crisis that we know is coming to show up at some point. The family, in effect, this may be hard to hear, but again, treats that person as they were the age where they got sick. So just like that person's social growth hasn't developed, the family treats them the same way. So you're still that kid, even if you're in your 30s or your 40s, and things still sort of behave that it's like become frozen in time. One of the other challenges, one of the barriers that families have to deal with in terms of independence is this all or nothing feel, where we either need to keep the child in our house and care for all of their needs, or we're throwing them out into the street where they're certainly going to die or be taken advantage of and all that. There's a lot of steps in between those two, and using the idea of you're just putting that person out on the street and abandoning them prevents any movement forward. There's total dependence over here, there's total abandonment over here, there's a lot of room in the middle, and there's a lot of services to help out so that the family doesn't end up being the sole provider of support and care for that person. Cultural issues we have to bring up here, because different cultures have different views of the family's role in support. There's a whole other talk we can do about that. But from the caregiver side, how do we approach the family? What are the family's beliefs about their responsibility for caring that person? Some cultures, it may be shameful to have that person leave the home. They are the family's responsibility, burden, however you want to look at it. Or other ones may be like, hey, you're supposed to work, go to school, or get out of here. We have to figure that one out. And again, we have to check to see if both parents are on the same page regarding that. If they come from different orientations about that, there may be a different story going on. And of course, interactions between family members are intense and loaded with meaning. Doing what I do for a living, one of my favorite things to watch in movies is the dinner scene where you have the family around the dinner table. Some of the best scenes in movies, Moonstruck would be an example, but there's many other ones. Of the family around the table and all hell breaking loose between the family members. One thing that I've heard from family members that is amazingly frustrating to them is when I say the same thing to their mentally ill or addicted adult child and that person listens, then the parent says, I've been telling them that for 20 years. It's who it's coming from. my department head says it has a great old saying, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. Sometimes you just hear it coming from somewhere outside, and because you're the parent, it shouldn't be this way, but it's not received the same way. It's complicated, and that's why outside help is important. We only have one agenda. We don't have all the agendas going back over decades. So this is something fascinating that I found while doing this research. Dr. Cartman invented something called the drama triangle, and I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you are going to be familiar with this. And these are the three roles that the family and that the mentally ill or addicted adult child go through all the time. So we have persecutor off to the left top here, rescuer off to the top right, and victim at the bottom. So, and what happens is, in a time of crisis, people move through all these roles on the triangle. So, speaking to the family members now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the rescuer role. You get a call from somebody who's in jail asking for bail money, or come pick me up, or the person's under the influence and they need help. So you're in that position of being the rescuer, and you bail that person out, even though you might be feeling that resentment and might be feeling that this isn't helping the situation. So then that person gets home, and now you're the persecutor. I can't believe you did this, blah, blah, blah. This happens, this happens, this happens. Meanwhile, the mentally ill adult child has moved into the victim role. So what happens is we all go around here. And if you do a little more research on the Cartman triangle, there's some very interesting exercises that get done where you actually hold the signs for which role you're in. So when you're in the rescuer role, oh, he can't help it, he has an illness, rescuer sign. When it's, you need to get the hell out of here and get a job, I don't care what's going on with you, then it's the persecutor. And then the victim, what did I do to deserve this? I worked hard all my life and I'm spending my retirement taking care of this person instead of them taking care of me. Victim role. So everybody zooms around, and my guess is that you probably have your own version of what these three positions on the triangle look like, but in a crisis, people make quick loops around this triangle. And the problem is in the middle, and we're just going around and around and around the middle. So for each of these roles, there is a potential solution. So for example, for the victim role, it's responsibility. You are such and such an age. This is what you need to be doing or moving toward in your life. For the persecutor role, there are choices. There are choices and options that will benefit that person. What are the different solutions to this? It's not just the same pattern over and over and over again. And then from the rescuer, it's negotiation. How do we develop mutually agreeable solutions? So there's an escape route for each of these three roles. But the first piece is to recognize when you're going around the role and then just stop. Stop the merry-go-round, and then we can figure out what's going on from there. Also, this is complicated. Another recommendation that I would make to families is to get an outside therapist in who can be a referee, but also kind of call attention to all of these three positions. So this is a Far Side. I absolutely love this cartoon. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. This is why people stay stuck. You see two negative choices, and despite the urgency of the pitchfork in your back, who would be motivated to do damned if you do and damned if you don't? There is a third door, however, behind the devil, but we'll see where that goes. So to address, this is an exercise that I came up with, helping out with families, because very often families are very good at how things are now and how you want things to be. And I would encourage you, if you're seeing this video, to pause this and to actually do this exercise. So down the left-hand side, how are things now in your situation? And focusing on, okay, here are the challenges. Down the right-hand side of the page, how do you want things to be? What would be ideal? Let yourself go there. Not saying that those things are going to happen and there's no magic wand that's coming to make those things happen today, but you have to at least see how you want those things to be. And then the challenge is, then in this middle column, I want you to write the first step. Just the first step. What's the first move to get from where we are now to where we want things to be? And I don't care how small that step is, because it's a step. And this big job of how we want things to be is just a compilation of a bunch of small steps. So let's do that small step. What would that look like? Would it look like not taking that person at home the next time they're in the hospital? Would it be I'm only going to give you money if you go to job interviews. I mean, I'm making these things up, but it's that first step in that direction. We're going to get a therapist to help us negotiate this. We're going to get more involved with NAMI or with IFSS, whatever that is, any of those small steps. And again, one of my challenges in working with people as a therapist is in these sort of situations is first we have to ascertain whether the adult child is going to be actively involved in this process or not. Sometimes they are, many times they aren't. And their refusal to get involved is one of the things that puts the brakes on. The next one is the parents being split. So then my job becomes working with the people who do want to change, and how willing are they to change? And are we moving toward that person going into a residential program nearby? Parents have paid rent for another apartment close by, so they're still financially supportive, but not, the person isn't in their house. There are a million different steps that can be taken that are unique to any given situation. And the challenge is, how do we sort those out and how do we find it? How do we make a plan that the family can be united on and move forward with? So the system also presents barriers to independence in this exit strategy we've been talking about. People going in the hospital, people going out of the hospital. People don't go in the hospital for the rest of their lives too often anymore. The hospitals are basically all short-term facilities now, and treat them and get them back out the door again. In fact, I heard one family member refer to this as pump and dump, which I thought was hilarious. Pump somebody full of medication and get them back out the door, back into your house again. Zombification is another term that came up from the parents as well. I worked as a screener for about 20 years, so I had to take a shot at myself. You know, those darn screeners won't listen. Very often the parents do know when there's a crisis going on, or they know when there's a crisis about to happen. Unfortunately, the system is kind of crisis driven and is often very slow to respond, and doesn't respond until after the thing happens. And that's a scary place because there's no guarantee everybody survives a crisis. Hospitals put huge amounts of pressure on families to take the person back. In fact, that's one of the first strategies I end up working with the family is, are you going to do that? Or are you going to hold the line? The system has blamed families for mental illness in the past. That great term, schizophrenia, blaming mom or blaming the family in general. The old apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We have lots of not pleasant sayings in the mental health system. And in the mental health system that historically has had an adversarial relationship with families. Tend to not listen and tend to do what we're going to do. Don't consult the family. If we're talking about an adult child, there's no legal requirement to consult the family. So we got that complication in there as well. So definitely, how do we make families and systems work a little better is definitely an area of work. And sometimes as a therapist, you can sort of be a mid ground on that. The families don't have unrealistic expectations about the systems, and the therapist can help navigate the system a little better. So the other thing we have on here is the involuntary outpatient commitment, which is a very controversial thing that's been implemented in New Jersey. Don't have a lot of time to talk about that, but that's been an option lots of families have sought after. If a person's become dangerous when they're decompensated, that they can be compelled into outpatient care. Whole other conversation there, but it's something we wanted to put on the table. So some of the strategies to consider: one, a combination of compassion and detachment. And it is the hardest thing in the world to tell, particularly parents, to detach from their families, but it's from their ill family member. But it's the idea of making the right decision, balancing the right decision for yourself and the right decision for that person instead of what's best for them all the time. Getting your own help, getting your own support. As I mentioned before, I think an ill child is the most traumatic thing that can happen to parents. And when it's mental illness or addiction, you have the stigma piled up on top of there, the shame that gets piled up on top of there, the elimination of social supports, that withering that we talked about. It is an uninterrupted grief process, and very few parents have gotten sufficient care for that. When I work with family members of people with mental illness, I'm very hesitant to diagnose people. But when I talk to the parents, I said, you realize that what you've gone through would probably qualify you for a diagnosis of PTSD. I always say that as if I expect the parents to recoil from that, or the families to recoil from that. And they go, oh no, we have PTSD. We definitely have PTSD. Like, I've yet to have one deny it. And then when we go through the symptoms of PTSD, they do. So part of this is, how do we deal with this extended grief process, the fallout from this trauma, and also letting go of expectations. We don't know who's going to recover or to what degree. We don't know if this person's going to be able to achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve when they were younger. Or maybe they're going to set and achieve different goals. We don't know, but it's letting go of, I can make this happen through sheer force of will. Not getting pulled into the chaos or the gaslighting. Again, people that are, in pre-contemplation need chaos and ambivalence all around them so that they continue doing what they're doing. Self-care. Another wise word from someone I know in recovery: never work harder than that person does. If the parents are working harder on the recovery than the kid is, or if the family members are working harder on the recovery than their ill loved one, we got us a problem. We got the wrong people doing all the work. The serenity prayer, you're probably familiar with. The serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. These are wise words, whether you're in recovery or religious or not. And that this is a process. The situation that we're dealing with here took decades to put together. It's going to take a little while to fix. There's no day, week, or month that's going to make this happen. But if we get the process right, the outcome will follow. But it's going to be a lot of work. So let's wrap up. First of all, let's focus on you, the family member. You're the one who's in here getting help. You're the one seeing this video. What are your stages of change? What are you willing to do? And then let's put that together with the family as well. Change plan is an ongoing process. What are your motivations to change, and what are your motivations to stay the same? Again, I encourage you to watch the stages of change and motivational interviewing videos to get a little more background on that. Where's the congruence and the dissonance in your own life? Where's the resentment in your own life? I would throw that one in as well. Escaping the drama by not contributing to it. The drama creates chaos, and that just keeps us going around that loop. What is your middle way? And if you have another family member, whether it's a spouse or whoever, and you guys are dealing with the situation, what is the middle way for both of you? What are the middle ways that both of you can agree on? Because if both of you can't agree on it, it's probably not going to happen. Your own self-care, getting your own help and your own support. And if you're seeing this, you've got a connection with IFSS somehow, and that is a really good thing to start with. Getting your own help, helping each other. No one knows like somebody who's been there. And I think the goal of this whole piece is to form the exit strategy. Where is this going to go so that it doesn't end in that scenario of illness and death and then crisis? So here's some of the materials that help put this together. Some stuff about motivational interviewing, some things about family groups. Patrick Carnes is, I believe, a global expert on addiction and addictive relationships. That's where the betrayal bond comes from. Changing for Good is about stages of change, and I gave you the information about the drama triangle. Also the information about the Carol Burnett wrong number skit. Definitely watch that. If you're watching this video, pull it up now. It's also hilarious. So, it's probably a good follow. And then the Gaslight movie from 1944 as well. Anyway, I thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this. Check out our other videos because they kind of operate as a companion to this, and hope to talk to you again soon. Take care.